All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle something huge, a complex, decade-long project to build a grand theory of creativity. I mean, this thing tries to answer one of the most fundamental questions we can ask about our own lives.
So let's just start right there with that big question. It's something I think a lot of us grapple with, right? How do you connect all your individual actions, your projects, the daily grind, to some larger, more meaningful creative purpose? How do you actually turn all the stuff of life into a creative life?
Well, this explainer is all about one person's answer, something called creative life theory. And this was an incredibly ambitious 10-year journey to build a comprehensive map for navigating that exact question. We're talking about a massive undertaking here, folks, an attempt to build a whole new way of seeing ourselves and our work. And you've got to understand, this wasn't some straight shot. The theory really evolved over that decade. Its focus shifted, it got deeper over time. It kicked off looking through the lens of psychology. Then it broadened out to sociology to kind of understand our projects out there in the world. And then finally, it turned to philosophy to ask the biggest questions of all, questions about the self. Okay, so how in the world do we make sense of a theory this big? Well, thankfully, the creator gave us a map. It's a core framework called the Self-Life-Mind schema. So yeah, let's dive in. And the whole point of this schema, really, is to take the just overwhelming complexity of a creative life and break it down. It splits it into three fundamental but totally interconnected parts. It's a simple way to get our heads around this huge, huge topic. Okay, first up, we've got the self. And listen, this is not just about your personality traits or what you're like. No, this is the deep philosophical who. It's about your fundamental being, your very existence, your actual place in the world. Next, there's life. This is the practical sociological side of things. It's the what you are doing. We're talking about the actual projects you're working on, the knowledge you're building, the tangible stuff you're creating out there in the real world. And then rounding it out, we have the mind. This is your psychological toolkit. It's the how. Think of it as your collection of concepts, mental models, and all the strategies you use to think, to navigate challenges, and ultimately to create. All right, let's dig into that first part of the map, the self. And what's so cool is that the theory approaches this with a really fascinating question. It doesn't ask what the self is, it asks, where is it? And the answer to where is this really powerful concept called the world of activity. The best way to picture this is to think of it like a giant container that holds your entire life. Seriously, everything you are and everything you do, it all exists inside this world. Now, here's the kicker. This container has boundaries, and they're defined by four givens. These are the profound things about your existence that you just don't get to choose. You don't choose your birth or your death, right? And you also don't choose your heaven, that's your cultural and language context, or your earth, your physical, geographical environment. These things just are. They frame your entire reality. Okay, so we've defined the container, right? Now let's look at what's happening inside of it. This brings us to the life part of our map, the sociological reality of your creative enterprise. This is all about how you actually build things out in the world. The theory sees this as a process, a journey. You start by developing a creative center, a core project or a core idea. And then that seed grows and expands into a much larger thematic enterprise that can end up influencing culture or even business. Now, at first, the theory just focused on two key actions: creating, making new stuff, and curating, which is about organizing stuff that's already there. But as the theory evolved, a third, absolutely crucial action was added: weaving. And this is the magic ingredient, really. It's the act of integrating everything, your projects, your ideas, your opportunities, into one coherent whole. And that final action, that idea of weaving, brings us perfectly to the third part of our map, the mind. Because you have to ask, how do you psychologically manage a process that complex? Well, the answer lies in building what this theory calls thematic spaces. Think of these as dedicated zones, or maybe like mental workshops inside your mind. Each workshop is built around a specific theme. So you might have one for a concept like platform, or another for a theory like activity theory, or maybe one for an idea like design thinking.
So, to navigate these mental workshops, you need what the theory calls strategic agency. Now, this breaks down into 9 essential mental moves. And don't worry, you don't need to memorize them all, but just look at the range here. It covers the entire creative spectrum, from that initial spark of discovering something new to the hands on work of producing it, all the way to sharing your work with the world through storytelling. Okay, so after this whole journey through self, life, and mind, we're coming back to where we started. What's the ultimate answer? How do we actually live a creative life? While he was developing all this, the creator had this aha moment while he was climbing a mountain. It's a great story. He looked back from a really steep path and it hit him. The view from the top wasn't the point. The real meaning wasn't waiting at the destination. The meaning was right there, in the act of climbing itself.
And that brings us to the crucial point, the core principle of this whole thing: being by doing. It's simple, but it's so profound. What the theory argues is that there's no separation, none, between the creative self and the creative life. If you want to be a creative person, you have to do creative work. Your actions and your identity, they're one and the same. So what this entire framework is really suggesting is that our actions, they don't just produce things like projects or products, they produce us. Our doing literally shapes our being. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to reflect on. Take a look at what you're doing right now and ask yourself, who is that person you're becoming?